On Saturday, April 17, 2021, Fearless transited the Panama Canal heading north in the Pacific Ocean back towards the Caribbean Sea. The Bridge of the Americas and the port facilities at Balboa looked beautiful as we rubbed the sleep out of our eyes and made our way towards the Miraflores locks. Ahead of us was Una Orchid, a heavily laden 700-foot bulk carrier bound for the east coast of the United States, and behind us was a 47-foot trawler named Paradise, heading to Shelter Bay like us. These two vessels would be our company for the ride up to Gatun Lake. Our day had begun at 03:30 in the La Playita Marina. We cast off lines at 3:45 to make our way outside the harbor to wait for our advisor. He stepped aboard at 4:10 in the morning, we handed him a cup of coffee, and headed towards the locks. Unlike our southbound transit, which was divided into 2 days, the northbound run was a single 14-hour event. This is due to the manner in which the canal schedules traffic through the locks. The last time for down traffic in the Gatun locks is 13:30, so we were in a race against time from the moment we started. Our line handlers had arrived the night before at 8 o'clock with extra fenders and long dock lights. Juan and Nick joined us once again, and it felt like a reunion with old friends when they stepped aboard. Mario, another line handler, joined them to round out our crew of hired help. Our good friend Jake Brace was also available to make the transit with us, so he filled in as our fourth required line handler, leaving Andy free to manage all the things she does to make Fearless amazing. The trip up was a little different than our first experience with Dragonfly back in January. The canal authorities had Paradise against the wall and us tied to them, and to be honest, I was glad it was that way and not us to the wall and them to us. They were kind enough to be our fender and share some of their footage of Fearless as we joined them in the locks. Maneuvering looks easy enough, but due to the amount of water moving around, it required a lot of vigilance as we made our entries and exits. We actually did go through with a Dragonfly, just not the Dragonfly we went through with last time. This little guy came and landed on Lexi and stayed with her for a couple hours. One of the things I love about time-lapse video is the activity you see in the background. People, trains, ships, cars, gates closing, the rails coming up, and kids. Lexi and Gavin are hilarious in time-lapse. It makes me want to tape a GoPro to them and see what a day looks like from their perspective at their attention span. Anyways, speaking of attention spans, things were not going as fast as we hoped. As we were quickly learning, heavily laden Panamax ships require extra time in the locks, and Una Orchid was moving very slowly. Once we were through the two Miraflores locks, we had to transit the 1-mile-long Miraflores Lake to get to the Pedro Miguel lock, which would be our final step up to the Gatun Lake level. Gavin's principal assignment for the transit was to make sure that the GoPro was charged and recording. He took this job very seriously, and thanks to him we have this great footage. Things were a little different in the Pedro Miguel lock. Paradise was on the right-hand side, so it made my approach a lot easier since our helm station's on the starboard side and I could gauge the distance a lot easier. But with Una Orchid moving so slowly, we were starting to get a little bit nervous about making our down traffic time on the other side of the lake. Lexi didn't seem too concerned about the waiting. She and Nick taught each other card tricks while Mario and Juan took naps and checked their phones. We got a chance to catch up on a little coffee, have a snack, and wait. This is a good time to mention that we hired an agent to help us sort through all of the administrative and operational requirements to get through the canal. We used Eric Galvez, and he was fantastic, responsive, on top of all details, and so helpful. Hiring an agent did add some expense to our canal transit, but it was 100% worth it, and Eric was the best. We cannot recommend him enough.
The boys said that this guy in front of us is too heavy. Slow going. We should have been halfway through the lake by now.
We finally got moving again once Una Orchid cleared the lock. Ahead of us lay the 8-mile-long Culebra Cut, then the remaining 22 miles of man-made lake. The canal is an amazing feat of engineering, but the Culebra Cut is a reminder of what we are capable of achieving with blood, sweat, and tears. When French engineers under the direction of Ferdinand de Lesseps tried building the canal, they tried to do so at sea level using the Chagres River, but flooding was a major problem. American engineers dammed the Chagres River to create the deepwater Gatun Lake, which was a bold decision. The problem was that the river starts in the middle of the Panama Isthmus and bends north, so it was necessary to excavate a path to the Pacific where no riverbed existed. This 70-foot deep ravine was one of the most challenging aspects of the canal's design. We were only 20 feet from shore, but we were in 55 feet of water. It was incredible. Now that the first set of locks was behind us, it was time to settle in for the 4-hour transit across the lake. This is a good time to mention that having all those extra people on board meant a lot of extra work for Andy. She spent 2 days shopping and cooking to ensure everybody was fed, hydrated, and comfortable. She had snacks, a full breakfast of homemade coffee cake and egg frittata, a cooler full of drinks, coffee for the early morning start, and for lunch, she made a simple but delicious rice and chicken combination so everyone got a hot meal to keep morale high. Our next order of business was finding crocodiles. When we had gone southbound through the canal, we didn't see any, but this time we saw 6. 5 were up on the beach, and one of them was swimming along the canal's edge. They weren't always easy to see, so see if you can spot the crocodile along the water's edge in this video. At the end of the Culebra Cut, you come to the entrance of the Chagres River and the start of the Gatun Lake. This is an area known as Gamboa, and a place where they store a huge crane called Titan, which is used to service the giant lock doors on all of the locks. We pushed Fearless hard across the lake, averaging 7 knots, but we couldn't keep up with either Una Orchid or Paradise. It was just simply too fast. We got there just in time to watch Una Orchid go in and the doors close, but it was okay. We still had one more time slot, and there was a giant bulk carrier named Conquest waiting to go down with us. One of the things I was mistaken about when we went through the canal the first time was why we went behind ships on the way up and in front of big ships on the way down. And it all has to do with the locomotives that you can see waiting for Conquest to arrive in the locks. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. First, we have to watch why we hire professional line handlers. These guys are good. They know what they're doing. Watch Nick make that awesome one-handed grab with the monkey fist coming in, tie that bowl in, and that line is out of there. Nice job, Nick.
Bravo!
The reason we go in front of big ships on the way down and behind big ships on the way up has to do with the locomotives, or mules. Up to 8 locomotives are used to move heavily laden Panamax ships through the locks. The locomotives need to stair-step their way up or down in front of the ship, so it's best if we are out of the way, behind on the way up, and in front on the way down, so the locomotives can control the ships without having to worry about a small boat being in the way. While the locomotives were positioning Conquest behind us, there was time to take some photos on the bow. Okay, family shot? Yeah, looking good. Okay, Jake, get in there. Come on, Jake. Okay, and everybody disperse! We went down by ourselves this time, so nobody was tied up to the wall. We were in the middle, so sort of suspended in between the 2 walls of the lock, if you will. And Jake got put to work. He can now add professional line handler to his resume. As you get lower down, you have to ease the lines very, very carefully and uniformly to make sure that the boat stays in the middle of the lock well. There's a lot less force on the boat as the water drains out, so it's not like a giant bathtub where we start spinning around in the bottom as we get close to the drain. It's just a very smooth downward motion as we go down. There's no turbulence, no boiling water coming in or going out. It's just a very gentle ride on the way down. Well, it's now about 2:30 in the afternoon and we've been going for 11 hours. Start paying attention to Gav and Lexi and what they're doing, because they're starting to get bored, they're sleep deprived, and they start doing some crazy things. It's funny. So, as we move forward, we're only going at 2.5 knots, and that's because people have to walk those messenger lines as we move forward. So any faster than that and they can't keep up. Those messenger lines are there not to provide any stability or any kind of control over the boat, but just there to pull those dock lines across once we get into position. We're going to move all the way up to the head of the lock, so we're only about a boat length from the doors. It's a really strange sight when you go up to those doors and there's just a 35-foot drop in front of you. There you can see Conquest barely squeezed into that lock. She is the absolute largest ship that will fit through this set of locks, and there's probably about a foot on either side of her hull. Just like with Una Orchid going up, there was a lot of hurry up and wait with Conquest. She was again a Panamax ship, fully laden, and so it was easy for us to move into position, and then we just had to wait. There was just a lot of waiting for her to get carefully and slowly moved forward as those locomotives were tugging, making sure that she was getting into position and not banging against the walls. It is a very, very uncomfortable feeling watching that giant ship come at you and just realizing those locomotives are all that stands between you and that giant ship ramming you into the wall and forcing you over a 35-foot cliff. But we won't think about that. So as the doors opened to the final lock, we moved in, and that giant car-carrying ship was there on the other side. They are such an impressive sight. So once again, we moved slowly forward, and we got to the head of the locks, and we waited. When those last set of lock doors finally opened, we were so relieved. Not everybody gets through the Panama Canal unscathed, and especially in a small boat. There are a lot of things that can go wrong. You're dealing with huge forces, big ships, a lot of moving parts, a lot of strong currents. So it's not a foregone conclusion that you'll make it through without a scratch, but we've now been through twice, and we were very fortunate that everything worked out well. It was flat calm on the Caribbean side when those doors opened. We couldn't believe it. We had never seen it like this over here. As we made our way towards Cologne, with the fading twilight approaching, we got ready to offload our advisor, and a pilot boat came out and grabbed him. These guys are really good at maneuvering those small boats, but it was really easy in the flat calm sea. Once our advisor was gone, we crossed the main channel and then headed over to Shelter Bay. Shelter Bay is located at the northwest entrance to the Canal Zone on the former U.S. Army base Fort Sherman. Fort Sherman was originally designed and built as a coastal defense site to guard the entrance of the canal. During the Cold War, it became the Army's Jungle Warfare Training Center. In 1999, the U.S. Army formally turned Fort Sherman over to Panamanian authorities as part of the overall transfer of authority of the canal from U.S. control to Panamanian control. Remember what I said about watching the kids on a time-lapse video? Here they are turning the tuna ball fenders into hippity hops as we enter Shelter Bay. It's been a typical day for Gavin Lex. Wake up at 3:30 in the morning, go through the Panama Canal. You know, all kids do that kind of stuff, right? We don't expect they'll appreciate everything they do while they're on the boat, but I know looking back on this one day, they'll be amazed at what they did, while most kids were sitting back at home watching video games and going to Little League practice. We spun the boat around and docked stern to. As the bow swings, you'll see a mega yacht come into view. That belongs to John Henry, principal owner of the Boston Red Sox. There's no doubt in my mind that this is a very unique and rewarding life. Going through the Panama Canal is challenging, it's stressful, but what an incredible event for two young kids to experience before they're even 15 years old. Juan, Nick, and Mario helped us tie Fearless to the pier, and that was that. They grabbed the extra fenders, the long dock lines, and they were gone. Put the day in the books, and put Fearless to bed.